Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. So we go over players that I'd be looking to trade for ahead of Week 7. I'll try and touch on players from each position. I think I've got two from each position here. So hopefully you guys can, really incorporate these guys into some trades this week. These are guys that, in general, I feel like have been underperforming, or at least I expect to perform better over the course of like the back half of the fantasy season. Guys that I think are definitely undervalued in the market compared to what I think they're going to do going forward. These are definitely trades that I'm trying to make myself. I try and really put my money where my mouth is. I try and act on the advice I'm giving you guys here. So hopefully you guys are finding this useful. As always, if you guys do have any specific trade questions, just let me know in the comments below. I love seeing what sort of stuff you guys have working there. Love giving you guys my opinion and trying to help you out as well. So yeah. That being said, let's get into it. We got, I think, 7 or 8 players to talk about, and hopefully it's a good one. Let's get into the first quarterback here. So I'll start things off with Dak Prescott, and I get it. He's been absolutely horrendous so far. This Cowboys team looks like the worst 3-3 team in the NFL right now, and I understand why there's a lot of reasons to be pessimistic about Dak here. They're headed into their bye, which honestly they needed really badly. It's a really great time for them to have it because of how poorly they were playing. But the fact of the matter is Dak Prescott's going to be effectively free for us in fantasy right now. You won't have to trade very much, if anything, to get him. I bet we see him drop in some leagues. People don't want to hold two quarterbacks through a bye. I could see Dak ending up on waivers here, and the defense is really bad, which is definitely a positive here. This is going to be a team that's going to give up a lot of points, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on Dak Prescott and this offense to perform better, and I really do think they're going to. The schedule going forward is a lot of teams that know how to score points and not really know how to stop points from being scored. You get San Francisco, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Houston, and Washington. I could easily see 5 straight shootouts coming there, and it's really similar to what we saw last season, actually. Dak and CD in this passing offense in general started pretty slow, actually, if you remember. Heading into the bye, CD Lamb was the wide receiver 20 on the season. Dak was not even QB1 at that point in time, and over the back half of the season, they were absolutely dominant. Those two players, Dak and CD, won people championships. I think there's a very real chance that that could happen again this season. The schedule sets up really nicely, and it's fair to assume that it was reasonable to expect this team to start slow. When I talked about slow starters prior to the season, I highlighted the Cowboys as a team that I could have easily seen starting slow this year, and it made a lot of sense. You had CD miss most of training camp. There was going to be a ramp-up period. He and CD just don't seem to be right on the same page right now, but they've got a bye to work that out. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic there, and Dak, again, he's free. If you need a quarterback, I think Dak could be a guy that gives you an edge and is not going to cost you anything right now. Next up, we got one more quarterback here, and it's actually going to be Anthony Richardson. And really, the reason I'm advocating for this is, again, because he should be effectively free right now. I've seen him get dropped in a couple leagues, and I just think that Anthony Richardson is far too talented of a player to end up not on fantasy rosters right now. He's a guy that I really don't want to be dependent on, but a guy that I'd be really comfortable with as my quarterback too because of the upside he possesses. It's fair to say that there really aren't very many quarterbacks in the NFL that can give you the kind of week-winning games that Anthony Richardson has in him, just because of what kind of freak athlete he is. He's going to throw the ball deep pretty much every single play. He's a guy that can run for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in a game. He is the kind of quarterback that can give you week-winning, season-winning performances, and I think if you can stash him as your quarterback too, he's got a chance to really be a difference maker, and the next 4 games for him are really set up pretty well here. You get games against Miami, Houston, Minnesota, and Detroit. Those should be 4 games in which he's necessary and should really get rolling here. We've seen Josh Downs return, which is going to be a huge lift to the offense. Michael Pittman is still playing. They should get Jonathan Taylor back here at some point, and I think that Anthony Richardson, even though he didn't really do a whole lot earlier on in the year, we saw some of that upside just back in week 1 where he doesn't even need to complete a high percentage of his passes to be a fantasy rock star. We know what that upside is, and he just absolutely needs to be on rosters right now because there will be several more just week-winning performances for him this season. Moving on to the running back position here, I want to highlight Jibreel Gibbs, who I think people are really frustrated with and don't really feel like they've gotten the level of production that they paid for. And I think that's a fair complaint for people to have right now, but I think a big part of it is just that he's kind of gotten overshadowed by David Montgomery. Montgomery has outscored him in 4 of the first 5 games for them this season, and that's obviously frustrating if you're someone who took Jibreel Gibbs in the first round and saw your other league mates draft David Montgomery in the 8th. But the fact of the matter is, he's still the RB13 in total points on the season, despite having his bye. So that's obviously fantastic. He's an RB1 in points per game. It's very clear to me that he's going to be a top 10 running back the rest of the season. This Lions team is absolutely electric. This offense can do whatever they want. And they did just lose Aiden Hutchinson, which that sucks. I hated to see that. He's a really great player, and he's really important to this Lions team. But it's probably going to mean bad things for this Lions defense. You're going to need to see this Lions team, this offense is going to need to put more on their shoulders. It's just even more opportunity and more that Jibreel Gibbs needs to do. And I mean, like, if you're asking me right now, how many running backs would you really rather have than Jibreel Gibbs? Like, it's probably Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, maybe Kyron Williams, and it's kind of the end of the list. Like, Bijan and Brees have been disappointing so far. I don't think you could realistically take David Montgomery over Jameer Gibbs. Kenneth Walker maybe belongs on that list, but like I'm saying, it's clear that Jameer Gibbs is like a fringe top 5 running back the rest of the way, and you're not gonna have to pay that at all. So he's a guy that I'm definitely kicking the tires on, seeing what I can do. I'm trying to get him for like Marvin Harrison and Sam Laporta in a league as a trade offer I have pending out there. I think Jameer Gibbs is the guy that I want to be targeting as someone that I do think can be a difference maker for us down the stretch, and obviously just hasn't necessarily hit us with those like week winning performances that we drafted him to have yet. One more running back that I want to be targeting right now is actually Aaron Jones, and part of this is just because he's proven at this point that he clearly has a lot of juice left in the tank. He's been absolutely electric when he's on the field so far this season, has been a really good player, and just happened to leave week 4 or week 5 with a hip injury, missed week 6 due to the bye here, and now they should be back in week 7. They traded for Cam Akers for some depth. That means nothing to me. It sounds like they're not concerned about this being a long-term injury with Aaron Jones. There's even still some optimism that he'll be back in week 7, and even if he misses some time, that's not really a concern for me because I want him for the home stretch here. If you look at the final 6 games of the fantasy football season here, we get 2 games against Chicago, which is a clear run funnel. That's a team that's got an elite pass defense, but you're going to be able to run on them very effectively. You get Arizona, Atlanta, Seattle, and Green Bay. Those are 4 straight games. Those are really 6 straight games against teams that I really do expect Aaron Jones to be able to put up big numbers against. Playing Green Bay in week 17, he gets a revenge game in the fantasy championship for you guys. That's obviously fantastic. There's a lot of reasons to be really excited about that, and I think this is a guy that really can be a top 10 fantasy running back over that stretch, and he's not going to cost you that right now. There are likely managers that are 2-4, 1-5 with Aaron Jones. They don't want to eat a couple bad weeks out of him, and if you're 4-2, a really good 3-3, 5-1, 6-0, if you're feeling really good about where you're at right now, I think Aaron Jones is the kind of guy that you can put on your roster and will be able to elevate your squad over the back half of the season into a real championship contender right now. Next up, I'm going to do it again here. I'm going to say that Chris Olave is a buy low right now. The real thing here is just why not? Like, you're never going to get Chris Olave cheaper than he is right now. He's coming off of 2 straight bad performances. One bad performance where the Chiefs took him away because it's what they do. The Chiefs remove the number 1 option on every single offense they play. So that one was pretty predictable, but of course it gets people frustrated. It was on an island game, on a Monday night game. They watched Chris Olave not do anything for them. And then we had this last week where early in the game he makes his first catch, gets concussed, fumbles the ball because he's getting concussed, and now you end up with a game in which he leaves early with a concussion and gives managers negative fantasy points. So he's obviously been a huge disappointment to managers so far this season, and he's going to be basically free right now. Like, you could probably trade, if you want to offer Rashid Shaheed for Chris Olave, I bet you'll get that trade done. And I really do still believe he's going to have a great second half of the season. Likely out this week just because he's got that concussion. They play on Thursday. They play the Chargers next week. That's not a great matchup either, and he's probably still going to be without Derek Carr. So if you take Chris Olave on, you got to understand that you're probably looking at 2 more bad weeks out of him. But after that, look at the schedule here. We get Carolina, Atlanta, Cleveland, the Rams, the Giants, the Commanders, the Packers, and the Raiders to close out the season. None of that really scares me at all. I mean, the Giants have looked decent on defense so far, but they're not spectacular at all. Cleveland, they look like they're just not the same kind of defense they used to be. And everything else is just a clear, fantastic setup there. Chris Olave is an elite talent. He's going to be facing a stretch of just really bad defenses over the back half of the season. This defense in New Orleans, not exactly playing at the highest level right now. Like, they're giving up enough points that Chris Olave and this offense is going to be necessary. He'll get his quarterback back, and I think Chris Olave can still be a top 15 wide receiver over that back half of the season stretch, and he's not going to cost you nearly that at all. 4-2 teams, 5-1 teams, like teams that are in a really good spot. Chris Olave is going to be a difference maker for you, and it's going to maybe be a few weeks before you see that ceiling, but it's going to happen, and he's not going to cost you anything right now, so it's just absolutely worth trying to take a stab at it and see if you can get him. And the last receiver on this list for me is going to be Brian Thomas. He predictably had a bad week. You had him playing the Chicago Bears. It's effectively the toughest matchup in the NFL right now for opposing wide receivers. We knew he was not going to have a big game, and he didn't. But obviously, when those things come to fruition, it just makes people a little bit nervous. He's a rookie coming off of a bad game. There are going to be some ups and downs with him, but he's got a solid matchup in Week 7 against the Patriots, who have not been fantastic against opposing wide receivers at all. And I really do believe he's a budding superstar right now. This rookie class in general, you've got Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, Brian Thomas. These are guys that I think are going to be legitimate superstars in the NFL, and Brian Thomas is proving he can be an elite number 1 wide receiver for an offense. In one of my leagues, I traded Amari Cooper for him off of the Buffalo Bills trade news. Guess I'll talk about that a little bit as well. We did see that Amari Cooper was traded to the Buffalo Bills this week, along with Devontae Adams being traded to the New York Jets there. So really fun stuff there. For Amari Cooper, I think he's like a low-end wide receiver 2 the rest of the season. Going to take maybe a week or two for him to acclimate to the Bills system. They're running the ball a ton, so you probably see a little bit less passing volume go towards Amari Cooper, but he'll be a lot more efficient in what he's given. It's more of a boost for Josh Allen than anything to me, but Cooper should be a really solid asset. And then Devontae Adams, I think he's effectively going to be the number 1 wide receiver in New York when he gets there. Garrett Wilson's still like a low-end wide receiver 2 here. It does elevate the entire offense, so I think Brees is a winner because you should have more scoring opportunities. Aaron Rodgers, obviously a huge winner. He becomes like an immediate streaming consideration going forward, but Devontae Adams like a low-end wide receiver 1 the rest of the way. But it'll be interesting to see how hurt Devontae Adams is. If that hamstring injury was real, that could be concerning. The Jets feel like they're kind of getting a little bit desperate making this trade. I don't think they're going to be a team that really makes a lot of noise, but it should be fun to see how that all plays out. So obviously a really fun day in the NFL today. But anyway, back to Brian Thomas. So yeah, I traded Amari Cooper for him in a league today off of that news. Figured I'd sell high on Amari Cooper, buy low on Brian Thomas doing that. But the schedule for Brian Thomas is pretty exciting here. You get New England this week. That's not scary. And then you get Green Bay, Philadelphia, Minnesota, Detroit, Houston, Tennessee, the Jets, the Raiders, and the Titans. That playoff schedule, a little bit concerning. The Titans are a pretty good pass defense, actually. We know the Jets are, even though they're missing some corners right now. The Raiders are a good matchup in Week 16, which is obviously something we can look forward to. But that playoff or that next stretch of games, these like next 6 weeks, should be really great for Brian Thomas. I think you could look at him as like a top 15, top 10 wide receiver over that stretch, and it doesn't cost you that right now. I don't think people realize just how good Brian Thomas is at this point yet. He's a guy that I'm really excited about as someone that could be a huge difference maker going forward. And I just want really talented players on teams with really bad defenses on my team because there's going to be a lot of opportunity for him to put up some monster games this season. And last but certainly not least here, we've got one tight end on the buy low list. It's going to be Jake Ferguson, who I'm just not worried about at all. He's coming off a game with 3 catches for 11 yards, and the fact of the matter is the Cowboys played as poorly as they could have played. They got absolutely smoked at home. And it's just not what you want to see out of the Dallas Cowboys if you're a Cowboy fan. But this Cowboys offense is going to take off. I talked about it earlier in the video with Dak Prescott. The schedule softens up for them quite a bit. They've got the bye week now. They can sort of figure things out, lick their wounds a little bit. And this defense is not good. They're going to give up a lot of points, and it's going to make this offense super necessary. Jake Ferguson still getting heavily targeted in the red zone. There's going to be a lot of scoring opportunities for him going forward. He's one of the few tight ends that I think I can just confidently start every single week, and I do think he's like a fringe top 5 tight end the rest of the way, and he's not going to cost you that right now. He's coming off of a bad game this week. He's going into his bye. Manager's going to be a little bit frustrated, and now's a good time to go in there and buy pretty low on Jake Ferguson as someone that should be a pretty solid difference maker for you. So that'll do it for the buy low candidates for week 7. Up next, I'll be going over some sell high candidates. I'll go over 5 players that I think are overvalued right now and that I'd be looking to trade away before things just turn to dust a little bit for them. So stay tuned for that video. That video will come out the same day as this one. After that, I'll be going over some starts and sits. So I'll cover every single matchup this week. We just have 2 teams on buy. So we got 15 matchups to go over this week. I'll do 8 in the first video and then 7 in the second. Stay tuned for those videos. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of that, just make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you can get access to all this. This will be content that comes out every single week, all season long, to help us win some championships together, and it's obviously going to be all free. So just want to have you along for the ride. Other than that, any specific trade questions you got, let me know in the comments. I'll be sure to help you out. If you made it this far in the video, give it a thumbs up. It helps me out quite a bit, and I'll catch you with the next one, guys. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.